Okay, this is a complete ridge cross-country task, Mifflin Day 1. It's a task that I originally did for FSX, then I think I provided it in X-Plane, and here it is for Microsoft Flight Simulator, and we're in the AS33 Beta 0.90, and so this is really the last test I'm going to do before I upload that beta to flightsim.to. The link will be in the comments. You can see here, if you look at the windsock, there's a fair old wind blowing. I'll show you that in a second. With the task is start 3 turn points, then the finish. We're going around this task. What do you call it? Clockwise. Okay, so I'm just going to get on with it, maybe make some comments as we go around. Let's get the engine management on. Get the engine up. Yep. The wind, I should show you, or the weather, is 16.5 knots from the northwest, roughly. And I've slowed the gusts down, 5-knot gusts from the west, and there are 2 layers, both with the same wind in it, just to give us some kind of confidence of what the wind is going to be at ridgetop level. Okay, so if you see this wind here, and look at the map, you can see the wind is coming from this direction. It's particularly well oriented, particularly for this ridge. This is going to be a great run along this ridge. But it'll also work on this ridge here, blowing on the other side of it, and you can see we've got to get to this turn point here. We're going to do it by following the ridge on the other side of the ridge, the northwest side of the ridge, so that we get the ridge lift and then cut across. Actually, I'll choose at the time. We can either come back down the original ridge and then duck out into the valley, go around the turn point, come back to the ridge, or we could go up this side of this ridge. I'll decide at the time. And then also to get to this turn point, at some point we will end up having to get across the high ground so that we can take the ridge on this side, so that we benefit from the northwest wind. Yeah. Okay, without further ado, I'll show you the task. If I click the task button here, okay, here's the task. Mifflin, a start at 4,000 feet. This task has been set and edited so that the heights in here are what we'd want for a soaring task. The start has actually got the height limit for the start as its height, so we'll know to interpret that as we go around. And then the following turn points, these heights, 2,360 feet, 1,010 feet, etc., and then the finish back at 813 feet, which is the height of the airport. Those are all the accurate ground elevations. They've just been put in the flight plan reasonably carefully. And there is a departure and arrival airport, but we're going to scroll off these pretty quick. Once we get in the air, we're going to point the next waypoint is going to be the start, just to make sure we get through it properly. From launch, I'm going to fly off to the northeast, so that we know we're behind the start, so we come through the start. The other thing I'm going to do, it is a rookie error to fly around with the McCready setting here set to 0. Effectively, that means you're going to tiptoe around the course slowly. This thing is recommending what speed you're going to fly. I'm going to crank that up 3.5 knots, something I'm happy with. There you go. It's saying fly around at 100 knots, as if you're expecting lift at 3.5 knots. That's what that knot does. And that means this vario, the speed to fly recommendation, which is this green needle, it'll be in when the lift is 0. That needle will be here at 0 if we're doing 100 knots. And that's the kind of speed I want it to recommend I fly at, possibly a bit faster on this ridge. I'm not sure exactly. We're going to find out as we go along. We can always click it up or down a bit. And then it's going to use that to calculate these arrival heights. So you can see, just look at this one at the end. These are cumulative, these distances, and these are cumulative. How much height will we have or lost? And you can see it's going to cost us approximately 12,000 feet to get around the task. If I slow down, there you go, it's only going to cost us 9,000 feet. So you might think, well, why don't you just dial all this down to 0? Well, it's if you That's the whole point of this really quite computerized analysis which is taking place. This is calculating if the lift were 3.5 knots and you did fly 100 knots, then you will finish the task the fastest. If you fly too slow, your cross-country speed will be slower. If you fly too fast, your cross-country speed will be slower. So this gauge, if you get your lift right and you fly at the recommended speed, that is designed to give you the optimal cross-country speed, which in a race is obviously important. Okay, so we're going to leave it at 3.5 knots here, which gives me 100 knots. Typical cruise speed. Take the task back off and do a launch. We already turned the engine management on. Extended the prop. The wheel brake is on. That red indicator there. So I'm going to start the engine. We're full of ballast. You can see this gauge here is showing so there is a crosswind, quite a serious crosswind, which means this won't be the easiest launch in the world. And then I'm going to turn to the northeast to get behind the start line, and then I shall already change the task to start, simply by I could have clicked, I scrolled down, brake off, leveling the wings. I'm weathercocking into the wind. Steering's quite easy when you've got both wheels on the ground. When that tail comes up, which it just has, now you're balancing this plane on badly. I'm just going to fly through these lines. I just want to take off. There we go, and we're up. Slightly dodgy takeoff, but let's just go with it. Gear up. The plane does simulate the drag of the gear, by the way, and it gets it about right. You know, if you've got the gear down, the plane isn't going to fly as efficiently as it would. So I'm just going to climb, get to the start height, 4,000 feet. There's Mifflin, KRVL, Kilo Romeo Victor Lima, which we just took off from. It wasn't that, the fact that I didn't keep it on the runway, we would have aborted the launch, but that isn't that unrealistic. Trying to take off a fully ballasted AS33 with a, there you go, I'm heading northeast, with not a particularly powerful engine at all in a strong crosswind is going to be hard work, and you can stay on top of it if you're ahead of the game. If you're ahead of the game, you know it's going to weathercock to the right, you're already giving it opposite rudder, you'd be fine. I just didn't do it very well at all. I wasn't really concentrating. Okay, so we're climbing out to the northeast, and when I come back to the start, if you can see in the gauge here, I want to be approaching the start. Here's our first leg here. You're going to see that as soon as I change it to the next waypoint, TP1, which is down here, it's going to highlight it. At the moment, it's highlighting our, you can just about see it blinking in the middle, it's our direction to the start, but it's tiny, so you wouldn't really see that. And it's showing we're going to get to that start. I've got to be a bit careful, hang on. No, we're doing fine. We want to get to that start at 3,999 feet, if you can. Normally a standard launch in a competition will be to something like 2,000 feet above the ground. And anything above that, you have to climb it. So the gliders will launch maybe 45 minutes before the start, or before the earliest start date. When the start is announced as open, that's when you can go through the start gate and have a valid start. It doesn't mean you have to. You can wait and let other people go ahead of you, which is a great thing to do because they mark the thermals in front of you. Plus, you might think the weather if the weather's going to improve during the day, then you might want to start later. So here you go. You can see. So we're climbing up to 4,000 feet, and it's saying at the start, which I'm flying away from it. We're currently scheduled to arrive at the start 300 feet below 4,000 feet. We're going to lose height when I turn. We're going to lose height. This gauge is taking into effect whatever the wind is between us and the start to calculate what that height is, and it's assuming we're going to fly at that typically 100 knots or so. Okay, so it's not too critical. Let's kill the engine. Wait for the revs to go to 0. There we go. Put the engine away. Okay, and we're gonna... Sorry. Mifflin's behind us somewhere. There you go. There's Mifflin behind us, and that's where the start is. And then we're going to go across to this ridge here and head off that way. I'm going to fly slightly more slowly to the start, see if we can make up just a little bit of this height. And I'm following the... There we go. I'm following the direction arrow. We are, of course, being blown to the left. The wind is coming out from coming straight down our starboard wing at the moment. So even though I'm pointing straight down the valley, that's not the direction we're flying. We're actually flying sort of diagonally to left here with a wind. There's a strong wind, 16 knots. There you go, blowing straight down our wing. And I'm going to slow down. If I slow down a little bit, we should gain height a little bit relative to the predicted arrival height. Because here the computer is assuming I'm going to be flying at 109 knots now. The first turn point is roughly at the end of this valley. And this is going to take us about an hour to get around, I think. Three kilometers to go, 2.9, take us no time at all. I'm conserving I'm conserving height at the moment before the start. There's no reason to burn height before the start. And the start line is normally really quite big. It's typically perpendicular to the first leg. And I don't know, it'll be a kilometre wide at least. So you can choose where on that line you want to cross the line. I'm not worrying about it too much, I'm just flying straight over the airfield here. And the kind of default rule for waypoints is that you get within 500 meters of it. That's good, you've reached the waypoint, not being too complicated. As soon as you're within 500 meters, you can turn and go on to the next. Okay, you can see down here we've got half a kilometre to go, which is 400 meters. So I'm going to, and we're at 3,800 feet, which is below the 4,000 height limit. It's going to get a lot less in a second because I'm going to speed up. So here we go, off we go. Our race is about to start. -2 knots. You'll see how much height we lose. I shall click, click. There you go, TP1. I'm definitely going to trim forward. Ridge flying, you tend to fly pretty fast, and the trick is to slow down when you need to. And we can afford to burn height a little bit now and fly faster than optimal. You can see the speed to fly gauge is telling us to slow down. It's hardly. The speed to fly gauge is saying, no, this is great. It's going to tell us to slow down in a minute. And when we reach the ridge lift, the whole design of this system is slow down in lift, speed up in sync. it has no way of knowing. It doesn't know what ridge lift is versus what a thermal is. And so it is actually, when we hit the ridge lift, it's going to tell us to slow down, because it thinks it's this once in a lifetime opportunity to gain some height, whereas we know we're going to have lift all the way along this ridge. And you don't want to climb. The lift gets weaker if you're higher up. It is referred to as twanging the trees. You want to be caning it along near the top of the ridge on the windward side. And this type of flying, can you see the speed to fly gauge is going, and the netto is going, look, we're in rising air here. The red needle on the actual vario is showing that we're not overspeeding. Because we're carrying full ballast, this plane, and it's flapped, this glider, so you go into negative flap, it can fly really fast. I'm just going to click the center of the plane button, which I think I did. Here we are here, caning along the ridge. And you can see this needle here on the right, which is the netto needle, giving us the air movement outside of the plane. It does that by, I've mentioned it in other videos, but looking at our altitude, seeing if that's going up and down, looking at our speed, working out from that, could you subtract the natural sink rate of the glider from your climb rate? You have to do some other calculations as well to avoid what are called stick thermals. Moving the stick actually has more impact on the glider going up and down, like this, because we're doing 130 knots. Just moving the stick a little bit has more effect on the absolute single climb rate than anything the air is doing, because we're doing 130 knots, right? So you point the nose down a bit, suddenly you're going 10 knots downwards. If you point the nose up a bit, suddenly you're going 10 knots upwards. You can see the incredibly clever thing here is this needle isn't going up and down with me moving the stick, and this needle isn't either, and that's because there's it's called compensation, total energy compensation, designed into those needles. So we are at, I have flown this ridge in real life, and it's actually going slightly downhill this way, I think. And in weak lift, that can fool you, because any slight downhill will make this glider look fantastic. So you can be caning it along, thinking you're doing great. And in fact, there's no ridge lift at all, really. And me and a guy from Blairstown called Bobby Templin flew 200 odd miles down these ridges, and the wind was dying. And beautiful, warm, sunny day, and we didn't know we'd flown far enough that we were moving into essentially a different air mass. And but this is, as I say, we're on a ridge, but the top edge of the ridge was actually gradually getting lower in the direction we were flying, and that lulled us into thinking, yeah, you know, we're maintaining a decent speed on this ridge, we're okay. And within seconds, we both decided we were struggling to stay up, and turned right and landed in the valley. It's very similar to what we're looking at here. We just slid off the ridge down into the valley and landed within seconds. Did the classic thing of we couldn't see each other after we landed, but we knew we were only maybe half a mile apart, and each of us left our glider and walked towards the other person's glider, but not finding each other, and got to the other end to find an empty glider. But anyway, when we opened the canopies, there was no wind at all, not a breath of wind, and we thought we'd been sailing along in ridge lift for the past half an hour. We knew it was getting weaker. There was just absolutely nothing at all. And there's a slight challenge on a ridge, which is you're quite low. You're lower than you normally would be. See, this ridge is maintaining me above ridge height, which is more a credit to the efficiency of the AS33. It can fly at, what, 140 knots. We are partly going down now. We've got to watch, if you watch the altimeter, that was at 2,700 feet, now it's at 2,400 feet. So we've burned some height. So we're not doing quite as well as we think we are. But we are hauling ass, that is for sure. And this is just an awesome ridge to fly. For two reasons. One is it's a great ridge. If there's a northwest wind, it just works all the way along. The other thing is pretty much all of these fields to the right are landable. And when you land, you really want to turn into wind and land. You don't want to cross over the ridge, even though you might see a beautiful looking field. The other side of the ridge, which there isn't in this case, of trees. But as soon as you turn left here and go over this ridge, there'll be sink and turbulence the other side of it, exactly matching the lift that's on this side. And it makes the landing a nightmare. All ridge-soaring pilots have done it. If it's trees as far as you can see to the right, then you've got no option other than to turn left. If you think you're not going to make it, you've got to peel off the lift, but you're going to be peeling off on the backside. And you take that into account. And probably dump your water early, for example. Because you just do not want to risk. You'll land. I have turned, in fact, it might have been here. I have turned left on this ridge somewhere and landed, say, for example, over there. And within seconds of turning left off the ridge, you're landing. Because you're in heavy sink. Everything happens really, really fast. Okay. So my executive decision is to go to the next waypoint, which you can see here. It's in the middle of the valley. I'm going to zoom a bit. Yeah, that waypoint there. I'm actually going to come back along this ridge because it's working great. I don't need to muck around. I'll try and gain some height as we're getting nearer to TP2, so that I can turn out into the valley into wind, which is going to be a nightmare. That's going to cost us a lot, but go around the waypoint and then peel back towards this ridge we're already on, and that'll be quicker than going up this, what I think would be this other ridge you can see here on the map, which is that ridge out there. I could basically turn. Our waypoint is at the top of here somewhere. I'll do a straightforward, get within 500 meters of it, and then turn. Actually, I'm going to do a 180 and come back, but alternatively I'd be going across to the right and go onto these ridges, because then it's a downwind jump over the TP2, which would make that slightly easier. But I think we're going so fast. We haven't, in fact, I haven't been paying attention. We're gaining height here. Oh, because the ridge is going back up. That's what it is. We're not thinking much about it. Okay, so pointing in the right direction. We've got 3 kilometers to go. As soon as this says 0.5, this is how people do 1,000-kilometer runs on the Appalachian ridges in northeastern USA, which I have not done. I've done my 500-kilometer out and return, 500-kilometer triangle, but I never did a 1,000-kilometer run. Okay, I'm just going to gain some height because I'm not sure what's happening here. That looks like an airstrip down there, but I certainly don't remember ever seeing that. So it might be. I was in the States 15, 20 years ago. Oh, there we go. Changing waypoint. Back down the ridge. It is quite easy to turn around and find you're going. See, I could have followed this ridge here, turned out, gone across here, done a slight upwind jump but downhill. The waypoint we're looking for was in the middle here somewhere, and then crossed over the ridge, flown straight across to this, back to this ridge. I'm flying slightly more slowly just so I'm a little bit higher. It's not very far away, this turn point. The indicator arrow is telling me go left slightly, so you can see the direction to that waypoint is slightly off to our left, but I want to stay in the ridge lift. the good news for you guys, if anybody is actually going to watch this whole video, I'm not expecting anybody to, not a single person, but if you do, it's going to be, at the moment, it's going to be shorter than I thought because we're hauling ass. Because I'm higher up, we're not quite referencing to the top of the ridge quite as much. It's quite easy to get blown sideways. If you keep an eye on this wind arrow here, here's that 17 knots wind I dialed into the weather, Microsoft Flight Simulator weather. And it's certainly blowing us pretty hard to the right. If you kind of notice, but I am crabbing. There you go, that makes sense. I haven't got the wings level. As I fly down this ridge, I am crabbing to the left. And it doesn't matter, because we're flying so fast anyway. Obviously, to me, in the air mass, we're flying dead straight. If we look at our yaw string, there you go. The yaw string is dead straight. I'm definitely higher here than you would be on the ridge for the maximum speed. From memory, the turn point, this town, which I'm sure is very, I was going to be derogatory about a town out here, but it's going to be a quiet town. The turn point is out this back side of it somewhere. Then you'll see it's going to cost us some height getting out there and getting back. We'll see what it is. I'm being quite careful here. Okay, see the arrow's pointing pretty hard left. I've got to get out across to here. And we're at 3,500 feet. I'm being super conservative. And just when this gets down to, the distance gets down to 0.5, I'm going to turn around. I'm not even going to look at the waypoint. The airport we took off from is further down that valley in that cloud shadow up there, I think. Oops. 0.9 of a kilometre, 0.8 into the headwind. There you go. 400 metres, 300 metres. We're at 3,200 feet. So we're golden. We'll get back easily. So we've got a wind blowing us back to. See, we've got the wind is from right behind us here. So in a competition, I would have lost time there. I was flying too slowly along the ridge, gaining height before I went out to that waypoint. Other pilots would have flown faster, taken a bit more risk, but would have been right to have done so. Got out to the right waypoint, turned around, come back, and would be now ahead of me up this ridge if we'd set off at the same time. Okay, next waypoint. The Sobo's ridge lift is just a bit stronger than it should be, really. You know, in a 17 knots wind, we can't even get down onto the ridge. can see the highlighted track. Click next. So TP3, so we've done TP1, TP2, TP3 is the final waypoint, but this is way the longest leg. So you're all the way around here, then this ridge turns to mush, it joins up with another ridge, but we're on this side of it, so we've got to somehow get across the other side of it. Which will be similar to what we did with the waypoint going out there, is we'll try and gain some height, but you'll see at the far end of this valley, it just kind of closes up in a slightly mushy way, and we've got to get over it. And the waypoint we're going to is at 2,090 feet. These are also great ridges over here. When you are coming from the further to the northeast, you get in places like Blairstown, New Jersey, oldest gliding club in the US. That is my American home. Then we would be coming, if you're doing a long distance task down here, you'd be on these ridges. You'd have come from way up there somewhere. You'd be coming down these ridges here. I think this one's called Bear Mountain from memory. Can't remember. And then before you get onto Bear Mountain, you cross a river, the name of which I forget. And then there's the Mahantango, which is another great. The Mahantango Ridge is a bit like this one, which is further up here. And there's a jump, which is, you've got to cross kind of like the river, the flatland of the river, to get off the end of the Mahantango Ridge. It looks like this. Cross it over. You're going upwind slightly, so you'd use a thermal for sure. To climb up to 5,000 feet, 6,000 feet or something like that before you then glid in this direction to get onto that ridge. And at the moment we're flying in Microsoft Simulator without any thermals, so any cross-country task has got to work in ridge lift. I have noticed, I don't want to knock Condor, the creators of Condor have done a fantastic job getting a complete package together with multiplayer, competitive soaring, with weather standardized for all the players, tasks given to all the players. Is actually an awesome package. I have noticed when you see people doing videos, there's a guy called Tim, fantastic guy producing videos, recording his flying in Condor. There's a lot of flying at what's called VNE, the velocity never to exceed VNE, the maximum speed, which is what's highlighted in red on the gauge here. I think it's a natural thing in Condor. You just set the ridge lift and the weather so great that you end up flying the whole task pretty much at VNE, which is not realistic at all. I quite accept Condor as a realistic simulator, but with that weather set so great for every single flight, that means you're living in soaring heaven every single day, but you're flying so fast absolutely everywhere with almost negligible chance of landing out. It's not like real gliding at all. Alright, so this gap here, that will be, that's Mifflin Airport there that we took off from. Okay, you can see how we're crabbing as we fly. And these gaps, it's called jumping a gap. We should see this lift, particularly on the Netto Vario. We'll see what happens to that as we cross the gap, because the wind is blowing here, as you can see on this gauge. The wind is blowing from the left. It's going to blow straight through that gap. That's what happened to me and Bobby Templin. We thought we were ridge soaring. We kind of got to a gap. Sure, nothing, so we just kind of sank. Got to the other side and found out there was nothing the other side either. Here we go. So we would be watching this gauge, and yeah, there you go. Not too bad. Yeah, that's fine. Overall, in general, the lift sucked as we crossed that gap, which is exactly what it's supposed to do. And it's picking back up again this side of the ridge. That's great, isn't it? Now, if you look in the distance ahead, you can see this ridge starts merging with this ridge. And our waypoint is like way off the end. It's what you can see here. See this? There's that ridge there, us coming along here. we're not going to have a clearly defined ridge to ridge lift on, ridge soar, and we are going to need to gain some height. So what I mean, it just turns into a bowl at this end. We've got to somehow get a bit higher as we go along here, so we can turn left and then fly into wind and get across this other ridge. It's not rocket science really, ridge running. It's just being careful. You just got to picture what the wind is doing. Is zoinking along here, going up and over the ridge, and you're trying to stay in the bit that's going up, and whatever you do, don't get over here, which is where the wind is going down. In my opinion, Microsoft Flight Simulator doesn't simulate the wind going down, and neither does Condor. Doesn't simulate the wind going down anything like as well as it simulates the wind going up. And the truth is, if you get over here, it's just horrible. You're coming down like a sack of potatoes. And to say you wanted to land in that field, you'd better be fast, because you're going to be in turbulence and just coming down at a horrendous rate. Okay, so I'm slowing up here. I could, I think I will, take a proactive opportunity, because I'm pretty sure I can get over that ridge to the left. If I could just gain some height. I'm looking at the averager on the Vario that we are gaining height. That's our absolute, 2.3 knots. Okay. And this is a little bit tricky. I do need to fly reasonably quickly because I'm flying into wind. Can you see now I've got a fairly strong headwind. You can't afford to fly slowly and gently. We would be expecting sink. Let's see what happens to this thing. Yeah, minus 0.5, we are coming down. But just eyeballing it, I was reasonably confident we'd be able to dive across here, keeping the speed up, so we're penetrating into the wind and making progress. This has got nothing to do with the optimal speed to fly. This is all about the optimal speed, not to crash and burn into the side of the hill. Okay, easy. Okay, so clearly this ridge isn't brilliant. I'm still going to fly slowly. We're going to be going uphill. What I'm trying to do is get over this one. Actually, this ridge is working okay. Okay, and this is all trees, okay? You can't land anywhere near this. What you can do is you can turn around and fly back out of the valley. This ridge I'm running along now, worst case, I'm slowing up so we can get some height. What you would do is turn around and just fly back down the valley out into the clearer land out the far end. Okay, so we're still flying in the right direction. We're flying along this leg here. We've got about 30 kilometers to go. I'm still climbing really well, actually. You see I'm only flying at 70 knots. While I can keep climbing, I will. Okay, we're barely climbing. We've got poorly defined ridge underneath us now, with a better defined ridge off to the left. You can see our average climb rate is we are actually coming down. So now was as good a time as any. This looks pretty good to get across this way. What I'm calculating is, depending on, I can't be sure we could get over this ridge here, but I know we're going to be able to follow this round to the right, and we'll be able to escape out here if we're struggling to get lift. And then once we do get out there, then we can be reasonably confident there's going to be decent ridge lift on this side of the hill, and if there's not, we'd go and land like an idiot in this valley, but we won't need to, I'm sure. Here we go. This looks a little bit scary. I mean, in fact, it's trees as far as you can see, pretty much. But this slope here, any kind of slope, the glider's going to beat, with a 57:1 glide ratio, or whatever, I can't remember exactly. Right, and now that is our ridge that is going to take us to the waypoint, which is up here, I think. See, we would have been coming up a ridge along here somewhere, but with all this high ground in front of it. We would have been okay back here, but then it's a little bit tricky. It's how do you get across all of this high ground to where we are now? We could have done it, I reckon, at that end. At this end nearest us where we are now, but it was just a bit safer to got that out of the way earlier. Okay, 10 kilometers to go. And we're going to be coming back along this ridge, the ridge we're on now. See this pretty much all the time. The speed to fly indicator is going, you fly too fast, you're in lift, you should be slowing up now. But we just know this, you know, lift all the way. So that McCready setting was just to get the speed setting, which is whatever it was, 100 knots or so, so that these speed calculations, this is saying that we're going to get to that waypoint from here, even with no additional lift, you know, with zero lift, we're going to get there at 200 feet above the waypoint. So we've got it made. We necessarily are going to have to turn over the hill. I think in real life there's a mast or antenna or something like that sticks up, which is what these waypoints are all typically, not typically, pretty much always, they're visual recognition points. So, and I just can't remember. I think it's a safe bet there'd be something sticking up, a fire tower or an antenna or something that we'd be able to see already. See, the crosswind is blowing me, partly because I'm heading towards a waypoint, but it's also the crosswind is blowing me slightly further over the hill than I want. I'd rather be, even here, I'd rather be on the upwind side of it. From memory, the waypoint is pretty much on the highest point. So, over here somewhere. But we'll follow the indicator, so it's 2 kilometers. There you go, and we're going to get there 780 feet above it, so not too much to worry about. There we go, going to the waypoint. And I am going to turn away from the ridge, even though the ridge is comfortably below us. Especially in a competition, you'll have sort of 40 or 50 gliders. I think it's the German word for it. They can refer to, when you see that many gliders flying together or just thermaling, some country refers to it as a fiberglass cloud. And you've got to keep your wits about you. So this is me turning away from the ridge, okay? So I've gone around that waypoint, one more click, and it will say finish. See, I slowed up there to gain some height as I went around the waypoint. It's just being a bit cautious. Okay, so we're heading back and we'll watch this arrival height. It's saying even from here, we nearly make it back. We're only 1,600 feet too low. And we're going to be gaining energy from these ridges all the way back. We've got that slightly tricky crossing to get back over. And on the way back, we're going to come off this ridge here and then final glide. There's our destination. See, we're going to take this ridge, come off the end of it, and then final glide then. So it's all very easy. The only Oops. Only tricky spot. Oh, that's not good. The only tricky spot is getting back over the. I'm going to get back down on the ridge and speed up. So try and optimize our cross-country speed. You know, lift is better down here. And we're going to have a crosswind landing when we get back to Mifflin. At a guess, I think we're going around here. I'm not sure. Yep, and in real flying, even though this all seems easy, you would be thinking about where are you going to land if it just, you know, suddenly dies. Unless you're in a 126 in the States, in which case you just land it in the trees. That's a joke, by the way, but they do end up in the trees. See, with the speed we've got, we're a lot lower than we were when we came over. I'm kind of hoping with the speed we've got, I wouldn't be taking quite this risk. I'm going to follow this kind of not great ridge here. The one to our right is clearly better. But you can see we're a fair way off track. And I think we want to get over to this ridge here. I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, there's another ridge behind it. That ridge behind it is the main ridge that goes all the way to TP1. The land is rising here as well. And what I'm going to make sure of is I can cut left. I'm not just going to keep going up here, getting lower and risk not being able to clear this ridge. I think at this speed we're going to do it easily. But basically, depending on how things go, we can kind of go left and then we go this way. We're at risk and sink from there, but then we're over on that risk. But that valley is getting lower and lower and we'll be able to follow it down. Look at this, we've nearly made it here. So, you know, after my criticism of Condor, this is going to be a V&E finish pretty much from as soon as we get onto this ridge here. Okay. I wonder how long this flight's taken. It's got to be pretty quick. We've been hauling ass all the way around. Now this time, because I know we're going to get left on this ridge. We've already got the finish made. I'll try and give us maybe a, I don't know, 300-foot margin. Oops, I'm not in the right place on this ridge. This ridge is definitely sloping downhill, so if you look at our altitude, 2,500 feet, you'll see that coming down. And some of our speed is just blasting through this ridge lift, and some of it is just because we're flying downhill. At a guess, we're going to fly VNE. We're only going to have 10 kilometers left, I think, yeah, when we come off the end of this ridge. There you go, that's pretty much VNE now. See, that could be an airstrip down there. It's possible. There you go, pretty good. So we've got a 300-foot margin, which is pretty much what I was aiming for. Can't see the airfield, that's normal. And we can always pull up from this height if we get a bit nervous. We can slow down for sure. And when we get there, we're going to be able to pull up and land. The main thing we're worrying about at this point is the crosswind on the landing. There you go, it's just got less turbulent. We cross a river, and then there's Mifflin County, KRVL, just the other side of it, I think. Oh, there's the airfield dead ahead, look. Okay. Water. Water, undercarriage, flaps, speed, trim, air brakes, lookout, landing. I'm looking at the, you can see the ballast dumping in that gauge on the bottom left. The tail tank's emptied, the outer tanks have just emptied. There you go, we just about timed it right. This is pretty realistic. My glider competition number was Bravo21, and I'd hear that on the finish line. They go. Occasionally, they would say Bravo21 as I crossed it, which was always gave me a buzz. There you go. And that would be the finish line there, probably. Gear is down. You can see us crabbing with crosswind. There we go. Not too bad. That's a fast cross country. I'm going to find out from the video recording of how quick was it. Pretty quick, I think.